In today's lesson, section 6.1, we are learning about ratios and rates. In example 1, it gives us some different ways that we can write a ratio. You need to write them down in the A over B form, just as kind of your template for this example. So it can be written as a fraction, with the word to, or with a colon. Those are the three ways to write a ratio. And what the directions on your homework are going to say is to tell whether the ratio is in simplest form. Can you tell that's a 3? Okay, maybe that's a little better. All right, to tell whether the ratio is in simplest form, and then to write it in two other ways. And if it's not in simplest form, we need to make it in simplest form. So on the first one, 2 to 5, is that in simplest form?
Yes.
2 to 5? So I would say yes. Okay, so I answer the question, is it in simplest form? It is yes, so now I'm going to write it in the two other ways, 2 over 5 and 2 with a colon. Now, if the original one had been with a colon, then I would write it as a fraction and with the word 2. It's just you write it in the two ways that are not in the original. Does that make sense? So if the original is a fraction, you write it with the word 2 and a colon. All right, now on the second one, 3 over 15, is that one in simplest form?
No.
So you would say, you're answering that question, no, and then you write it in simplest form and in two other ways, and 1 colon 5. Okay, so this entire thing is your answer. Okay. All right, all of it's important. So it'll probably be like 1 point per, per term, because there's multiple things you need to write that are part of your answer. All right, so that's writing ratios. Now we're going to put them in order from least to greatest. So we have these ratios. All right, we have 15 over 4, 19 to 5, 53 over 15, 4 to 1, and 18 to 6. And you can see that they're all written in different formats, some as a fraction, some with the word 2, some with the colon. So they're all in different formats, but in order to compare them, I must first convert them to decimals. I do that by dividing the first number in the ratio by the second number in the ratio. I can use my calculator. 15 divided by 4 equals what?
3, 1 over 4. Wait,
No.
3 over 4.
As a decimal. 3.75. Okay, what about 19 to 5? What would that one be? 19 to 5. Okay, 19 to 5 is going to be 3.8. And I did a 3.80 because then you can kind of easily compare 75 to 80 and see which one's bigger or smaller. The 0 is not necessary. All right, go ahead and convert the last 3 ratios now to decimals. So 53 over 15 changes to 3.53 repeating, and then the last 2 are whole numbers, 4 and 3. Okay, so now that everything's a decimal, I can compare them, and what's the smallest ratio? What's the smallest ratio?
3.0.
3.0. So I write it in my answer back in its original format. So that was 18 to 6. All right, and then I do my next one, which was 53 over 15. All right, and go ahead and write the rest of them in order, least to greatest. Okay, so 15 over 4 is next. And then 19 to 5, and then
4 colon 1.
4 to 1, yes. Okay, so we write them back in original format, least to greatest. All right, I think you have maybe 2 of these on your homework tonight. So just writing them, yes, you have 2, writing them least to greatest. Now, in the next example, we're finding unit rate. Okay, so to find unit rate, I must take my denominator down to 0. So in the first one, it says it's $161 for 7 shares. Well, if I want to find the unit rate, I want to know how much money 1 share cost. So whatever number is in my denominator, I'm going to divide the fraction by that number, okay? Reduce it by that number, top and bottom. So this step is important. I do want you to show this step on your homework. Divide top and bottom by 7 and you get $23 per share, or you could say it this way, $23 per share. Either way, you're saying the same thing. So you can write it as a fraction or with the word per, P-E-R. All right, go ahead and try the second one. So what did you divide this fraction by? You divide by 5, top and bottom. All right, and then you get 14 miles per hour, or you could even abbreviate it miles per hour, MPH. Okay, again, it still has that word per in there, so we're fine. That's my unit rate. Now, the last thing we need to cover is something called equivalent rates. Okay, with equivalent rates, what we need to do is create a conversion factor. I don't know if you guys remember, but earlier this year, we actually have already worked with conversion factors. It is a fraction that will essentially cancel out the unit that we start with and convert it to the unit that we need to end up with. So what we do is we look at this fraction, or this, you could call it an equation, if you will. And we try to find, okay, what are the units that can be converted? Can I convert miles to seconds? Can I convert miles to minutes, or seconds to minutes?
Seconds to minutes.
Seconds to minutes. That's the one that converts. Does everybody agree?
Yes.
How many seconds are in 1 minute? 60. So you're going to rewrite the initial fraction, 300 miles over 20 seconds. And you're going to multiply it by the conversion factor. What you said, 60 seconds in a minute, right? So here's what you need to figure out. Would you write 60 seconds over 1 minute or 1 minute over 60 seconds? And here's how you figure it out. You have to be able to cross-cancel the unit that's in your first fraction. So in order to cross-cancel it, the seconds need to be on top or bottom? It needs to be on top. So that's why it's 60 seconds over 1 minute. Okay? Now my seconds can cancel. That was the most important part. And now I'm going to multiply the units and the numbers together to see what I have left. 300 times 60. Actually, I could cross-reduce, can't I? 20 and 60 to 1 and 3. So 300 times 3 is 900 over miles over 1 minute is what was left. And look at that. We did the conversion that it was asking us. How many miles in 1 minute? We know that that is humanly impossible, right? To travel 900 miles in exactly 1 minute and 60 seconds. That would be impossible, but we still did successfully convert the unit. So here's what I want you to do on the second one. Use the conversion rate to convert this value. All right, so we're going to use a conversion rate every time, because it's easier to be able to discern. Sometimes it gets confusing. Do I multiply? Do I divide? By how many? If we use a conversion rate, it really takes out a lot of that guesswork. All right, so don't try to figure this out. Basically what I'm saying is, don't try to just figure this out mental math. Sometimes you may be able to, sometimes you may not. What your book says is to write the equivalent rate, so it doesn't necessarily have to involve the conversion factor, but if you learn it, you can get it right every single time. And that's the goal, right? That we could do 100 of these and get them all right. In order to do that, we have to know the conversion factor. So $33,000 in 1 year. Okay, so what is my conversion factor? Did everybody figure that out?
12 months.
12 months in 1 year. That's my conversion factor. Does everybody agree that 12 months in 1 year is the same thing? Okay, so we're essentially not changing any values here. So my question is, do I multiply it by 1 year over 12 months or 12 months over 1 year?
12 months over 1 year.
1 year over 12 months. Why? It has to cross cancel.
Oh.
So Where is the unit that I'm canceling in my first fraction, and I need to be able to cross cancel it. All right, so now I can cross cancel the year, and what am I left with on top? $33,000 over 12 months. But that's not what it asked me to solve for. It said how much money in 1 month. So what would I need to do to figure out how much money in 1 month? Divide by what?
12.
Top and bottom by 12. And I would get $2,750 per month. Okay? So sometimes when your denominator is not 1 after you multiply or divide, you have to now divide it by that number. Basically, you're finding the unit rate, just like we did in the last example. All right, so we're going to do 2 more because I know that this is probably the most difficult part of the lesson, so I just want to do a little more practice. All right, now this one may not come out to be, a whole number as my answer, and that's okay. What's important is that we take our first fraction and we create an equivalent rate and we multiply. So I want you to try to do that. What's your conversion factor? Minutes to hours. Minutes to hours. What? No, there is no feet. Listen, you have to see both of the units in here. We see minutes to hours. We see a mile, but there's nothing that we're converting to in this equation with a mile. It's minutes to hours. So here's my question now. Is it going to be minutes on top and then hours on bottom, or hours on top and minutes on bottom?
No, hours on
Switch
top
'em.
because,
Your minutes have to cross cancel. So because they have to cross cancel, they have to go on the bottom. Okay? So guys, this initial fraction really is kind of my tone setter, if you will. Okay? That tells me how I'm going to set up my conversion factor. I have to be able to cross out a unit. If I don't cross it out, I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not converting anything. So convert your minutes, or I'm sorry, cancel your minutes. And now 45 hours over, what's 2 times 60? 120 miles. But is this what it asks us to solve? How many hours in 120 miles? So go ahead and now get to your answer. I need to divide top and bottom by whatever it's going to take my denominator down to 0. That means to divide it by 120. Whatever number's in my denominator, that's why we learned unit rate last example. So now I get 0.0375 hours per mile. And that's my answer. Who got it right? Anybody? 3/8 would be acceptable. All right, now do the last one. Completely on your own. When you have the answer, I want you to raise your hand so I can check it. So 50 miles in 1 hour. What is my conversion factor? 5,280 feet over 1 mile. Did you write it like that?
No.
Why did you write mile on the bottom?
Because it wants to be on the bottom.
So you can cross cancel it. Now you multiply them and you get 264,000 feet in 1
Oh, that was so easy.
hour.
I get 50 miles an hour.
In 1 hour.
That did challenge.
And look, this is exactly how I do it. How many feet in 1 hour? I figured it out.
So,
All right, so if you understand that, that's everything you need to know for 6.1.